Did you know? Before the invention of trains, we used to run wagons on your mom. Oh, the memories. Let's just keep on going right here, give her a little highlight.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. This weekend, former WBA Super Bantamweight champion Nazarena Romero will be making her MVP debut opposite the ring veteran gatekeeper Maria Salinas in what is a Super Bantamweight fight on the undercard of Holm versus Han 2 in what is a very busy weekend of fights all around. Dmitry Bivol is returning to action in Russia. O'Shaquie Foster is defending his title against former champion Ray Ford. And here, current reigning WBA lightweight champion Stephanie Han will be defending her title against Holly Holm. On that undercard, Nazarena will be returning to action, sporting a professional record of 14 wins with 1 loss and 2 draws, 8 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 17 professional bouts. Now's a pretty good time to be campaigning as a super bantamweight, it being that Ellie Scotney, this division's inaugural undisputed champion, is now officially moving up in weight and set to drop all the titles she currently holds. Nazarena's opponent, Maria Salinas, sports a professional record of 27 wins with 14 losses and 6 draws, 7 knockouts, having only ever been knocked out once. 35 professional bouts. That's actually pretty impressive when you consider the number of times she's lost versus the number of times she's been stopped and who she's been in there with. Currently on a 5-fight losing streak, losing decisions to Kenya Enriquez, Cecilia Rodriguez, Reina Tellez, Shakila Ellis, and more recently, Iana Verduzco in what was November of last year. Nazarena Romero herself is coming off a split decision loss to former champion Mayeli Flores in what was May of last year. It was the only fight that she had all of last year, and the night of, it will have been roughly a year's time since Nazarena's last fight. So you see what kind of opponent they got her, and the amount of time that's passed. This is a tune-up fight. A tune-up fight that I expect Nazarena Romero to win. They are easing her back into activity for what is a strategic signing because they've signed Mayeli Flores, they've signed Nazarena Romero, and these are 2 fighters stand a very good chance of becoming world champions again in the absence of Ellie Scotney, who is now moving up in weight. Nazarena Romero is best described as a pressure fighter and a very strong puncher, one of the stronger punchers in the super bantamweight division. What she lacks in X's and O's and fundamentals, she makes up for in raw power. She is a very fan-friendly fighter. Does she knock out Maria Salinas this weekend? I don't know, but at minimum, I think she can win a points decision. Maria is a tough nut to crack, having only ever been knocked out once in 35 professional bouts. She's no pushover, no Glass Joe, or Glass Jane, I should say. But I definitely think it's a fight that Nazarena Romero can win. It's really just the question of how. Does she knock her out or does she win on points? Either way, I expect Nazarena to get back in the winner's bracket and get back in line to fight for an alphabet title. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, WBO says Lomachenko can fight Navarette after Suarez gets a shot. As reported by The Ring's Mike Coppinger, the 3-division world champion is planning to end a 2-year retirement in the fall, with one of his desired opponents being Emmanuel Navarette, the current reigning WBO and IBF junior lightweight champion. The WBO informed The Ring that it is willing to let Lomachenko get a crack at the unified champion, but not until Navarette fights Charlie Suarez. Shortly after beating Eduardo Nunez to unify the super featherweight titles, the WBO ordered Navarette to fight Suarez for a second time, his mandatory challenger, due to the controversial outcome of their initial meeting. The 2 last fought in May, with Suarez being the heavy underdog. Despite that, he had plenty of success and gave Navarette a serious fight. Navarette initially won a technical decision after suffering a cut, which stopped the fight in the 8th round. The cut was believed to have been caused by an accidental headbutt, and Suarez was down just 1 point on 2 judges' scorecards. However, the decision was eventually overturned to a no contest, as the large gash that opened up over Navarette's left eye was proven to be the result of a punch, not a clash of heads. Suarez will first take a stay busy fight against Manuel Avila in July. Navarette will have to fight him immediately after. In the meantime, Lomachenko, who held Navarette's WBO super featherweight title in 2016, could wait around for the winner. He may also go down another path. Gervonta Davis, who was also mentioned as someone Lomachenko wants to get his hands on, the two were initially in discussions to fight at the end of 2024, shortly after Loma beat George Kambosos for the IBF title. Those discussions never gained any traction, however, and soon after, Lomachenko abruptly retired. So it would seem that the WBO are putting up a bit of a roadblock, that Emmanuel's not at liberty to fight Loma until he fights Charlie for a second time. But there actually is an easy fix. Don't forget, Emmanuel's got not one, but 2 alphabet titles. If the WBO are giving you static, drop that belt. Easy fix. He's still got the IBF. We don't yet know who's financing Vasyl Lomachenko's return to the sport of boxing. I figure that he's probably coming back to box under the Zuffa banner. And if it's not those guys, maybe he'll be boxing on Turkey LL Sheik's Ring Magazine and Riyadh season cards. Either way, nobody expects him to go back to Top Rank and go back to doing more of the same. The point being, there's probably a lot of money tied into Loma's ring return. And a lot of money to be made for whoever's willing to meet him. So the question is, what gets Emmanuel Navarette more money? Hanging on to his WBO title and fighting Charlie Suarez for a second time, or fighting Vasyl Lomachenko in the fall, even if it is at the expense of the brown belt? He can always circle back and fight Charlie afterwards. Theoretically, he could. If he drops the brown belt, lets it go to Charlie, fights Loma in the fall, theoretically beats him, can spin the block for a Charlie Suarez rematch afterwards. That's if he beats Vasyl Lomachenko, which begs the question, does he beat Vasyl Lomachenko? Speculation seems to be that Vasyl Lomachenko will not be returning to the lightweight division. He may instead decide to campaign at super feather, which was arguably his best weight, because Vasyl Lomachenko really isn't a big guy. And at 135, he himself said that he felt the difference in size of his opponents, that a lot of them were bigger than he is. So maybe he's coming back at 130, which is why he's looking at guys at 130. Looking at Emmanuel. Emmanuel, who dropped a decision to Vasyl Lomachenko's countryman, Denis Berinchyk, who is best described as a Timu Vasyl Lomachenko, a lesser Lomachenko. In what was Emmanuel's first foray into the lightweight division, he lost. So you figure that, well, if Emmanuel couldn't handle Denis Berinchyk, right, he may not be able to handle Vasyl Lomachenko, even under these circumstances. Sure about that. If they were to put this fight together for the fall, Vasyl Lomachenko would not have fought in 2 years, and he's not getting any younger, not getting any faster. Sure, he's not biting off more than he can chew fighting Emmanuel Navarette, who looked sensational in his last outing against Eduardo Nunez in what was their unification match. What's different now for Emmanuel than any other fight before it is he's actually hired a nutritionist. You get one look at Emmanuel Navarette in between fights and you can see this guy, he likes to eat. Evident in his fight with Denis Berinchyk, where he was fat and flabby, fleshy. He had man boobs in that fight. Looked slow, ineffective, not as explosive as a lightweight as he is as a super feather. But he has since remedied that problem by not only returning to super feather, but hiring a nutritionist. And we saw what difference a day makes in the Nunez fight, which is the last time we saw him. That version of Emmanuel Navarette, I think, not only beats the brakes out of Charlie Suarez, but he could pose some serious problems for an aging Vasyl Lomachenko who hasn't fought in 2 years. Even though Vasyl Lomachenko is the fighter who gets all the plaudits and all the praise, he's the more decorated fighter, the more promoted fighter, you don't often hear Emmanuel talked about as a pound-for-pound fighter, even though in my opinion that's what he is. He's a 3-weight world champion, the same as Vasyl Lomachenko. He's got some signature wins. He's got some great performances. And in light of that, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Vasyl Lomachenko wins. The odds makers might have it that way, the bookies if the fight actually gets made, but Emmanuel can give him some problems. He's one of the more awkward fighters. How do you prepare for a guy like that? Who do you spar that can mirror Emmanuel Navarette? That's one of the guys that Vasyl Lomachenko is looking at for his ring return. Not interested in layups and tune-up fights. He wants to jump into the deep end right away. The money matters. As stated, the difference between this fight happening and not happening, I think, is what does Emmanuel stand to make for boxing Vasyl Lomachenko? If the number is interesting enough, I think he'll part with the brown belt. I think he'll be willing to sacrifice it to meet Loma in the fall. Then if he wins, he can circle back for Charlie and get his old belt back. Now, as it pertains to another Ukrainian fighter, the one who fought this past weekend, Turkey El Sheikh gives personal scorecard for Alexander Usyk versus Rico Verhoeven. Turkey had Rico 4 rounds ahead at the time of the stoppage defeat to Alexander Usyk. Verhoeven put on the display of a lifetime and stunned the world as he came ever so close to inflicting a historic upset on the Ukrainian champion. But he was stopped on his feet in the penultimate round by referee Mark Lyson in controversial fashion and was not given the opportunity to survive until he could go to his corner. The official scorecard saw Verhoeven ahead by 1 judge, while the other 2 officials had the bout at a draw at the time of the stoppage. Neither of which bodes well for Alexander Usyk. Whether you had Rico Verhoeven ahead or you had the fight at a draw, it was never intended to be that close. Saudi boxing chief El Sheikh, who sat ringside and put on the event, was convinced that the Dutchman was ahead. He remarked to Ring Magazine, "I had Rico up 3 rounds entering the 11th round. On the final outcome and plans for a rematch," El Sheikh added, "it was a bad stoppage. Rico deserved to continue to fight. It's clear that Usyk was controlling in the end, but the referee should have allowed the fight to reach a clear result. It is the call of Usyk now, what he does next. Caballel has waited a long time. We want to do the fight in a stadium in Germany, and after that, we want to see the rematch with Rico, and I want to do 2 more fights with Rico. It is clear Verhoeven has been vindicated in his right to feel aggrieved with the decision, but ultimately, he will now have to wait until 2027 to get a shot at Alexander Usyk again. As has happened on many occasions in the squared circle, Verhoeven felt he had more to give, and he has confirmed he's filed an appeal against the decision, with the suggestion the stoppage was made after the bell had sounded. He said they stopped the fight after the bell. I think we're just going to go ahead and file an appeal because this makes no sense. When the referee intervened, I wasn't dazed or anything like that. I looked at him, thinking, why did you stop it? We were so close to making it to the end. It's totally absurd. The referee must be aware of what he's doing. They stopped the fight after the bell. A premature stoppage is one thing, but stopping the fight after the bell is quite another, because what that essentially means is Rico had every right to go into the 12th round.
I know his first name's Mark. The referee was on the flight with me on the way back. So I spoke to him. I went over, and the best way to sort any dispute is go and ask him the question, isn't it? Yeah. To the person who's done it. I said, "You've made a mistake." And he said to me, which was very important, he said, "Peter, I didn't hear the bell." Yeah? I said, "Well, now that I believe, because I didn't hear the bell either. I didn't hear the bell." I thought it was like 2 seconds before, because I'm only going off what people's telling me around the ring. Yeah. I'm more focused on the fight itself, Coogan. But this is what it was. So I think, look, obviously it's in the heat of the moment. Rico's gone down. Usyk's gone in to finish it. But obviously he's behind Usyk. He hasn't really seen, but there's been no punches landed. So yes, it's a mistake, and he's made. I'm going to call it a genuine mistake. That's all I can do, because I can't accuse a fellow of anything else. That's ridiculous. There's no facts there. And after me speaking with him, he said it, and he said it honestly. He said, "I never heard the bell." So I take that as right, because I didn't hear the bell either. But look, I thought we seen an excellent fight. So we can talk about glitches and what referees should and shouldn't be doing. We've seen it before. 1 minute they're having fighters in the too long, 1 minute they're stopping it early. This is a problem when there's a third man in the...
I didn't hear the bell either during the fight, mostly because I watch fights with the sound off as to not be susceptible to the power of suggestion from the commentators. But this is an explosive revelation that Mark Lyson stopped the fight at a time where they shouldn't have even been fighting. Rico should have been allowed to go back to his corner and continue into the 12th round. Will that be enough to get the decision overturned? Maybe made a no contest? Rico said, "I think we're just going to go ahead and file an appeal because this makes no sense. When the referee intervened, I wasn't dazed or anything like that. I looked at him thinking, why are you stopping it? Of course mistakes happen, but he needs to admit his error. They should review the footage and declare a fight a no contest, or go to the judges' scorecards. And if they went to the cards at that point, I was ahead. Irrespective of the outcome, very upbeat and positive Rico Verhoeven is now ready to begin his boxing chapter after surprising Alexander Usyk. I heard the 10-second warning, and I was like, keep slipping and sliding to try and get through it and recover and fight for the 12th, Verhoeven told IFL. I thought maybe after the knockdown, we were even on the scorecards. I thought at least we get to fight until the end, even better for the fans. But I didn't get the opportunity to shock the world. The referee thought differently. Now that is an interesting tidbit because there's a lot of hullabaloo about the judges' scorecards. That two of the judges had the fight a draw. Coincidentally, Rico thought the fight was a draw as well, after getting knocked down. For all those people saying that the judges were already on their way to screwing Rico Verhoeven, not in Rico's opinion, Rico had it the same way they had it. I don't care that the people didn't know, but I knew we had a good shot versus this guy, said Verhoeven. I showed that. I can fight and I can box, so I'm ready for anybody. Maybe I didn't hurt him, but I definitely surprised him with the angles I took to him. Verhoeven, a 37-year-old from the Netherlands, certainly earned more shots in the squared circle with his strong performance. He plans on seizing untapped opportunities, entering the next chapter of his fighting career. I just want the biggest fights, said Verhoeven. The kickboxing chapter is closed. It's a new chapter now, the boxing chapter. And as a boxer, he will likely make more money than he ever made as a kickboxer. It's just a bigger sport that kicks out bigger purses, depending on the opponent. Though who's the right opponent for Rico Verhoeven moving forward? I wouldn't mind seeing Rico fight Derek Chisora or Deontay Wilder. Derek has since walked back his claims that he's gonna retire. He's not retiring. You know him. For the right fight and the right purse, he'll fight anybody. So maybe he'll fight Rico. Deontay, he's coming off the win over Derek. Maybe you could get him to fight Rico. Or Dillian White. One of two things in common between Dillian White and Rico Verhoeven, that they're both crossover guys. They're both guys who crossed over from kickboxing into boxing. So maybe you could do a fight between him and Rico. Derek, Deontay, Dillian. There is also Francis Ngannou, who's had his 2 forays into the sport of boxing, fighting Tyson Fury, shocking him, and getting knocked out by Anthony Joshua. Maybe you could do a boxing match between Francis and Rico before the year is out, because Rico Verhoeven needs to find somebody to fight in the interim while he waits for Usyk to settle affairs with Agit Kabayel. Maybe you have Rico box in the co-main event of Usyk versus Kabayel against one of those aforementioned fighters. Any one of them would do, which would in effect set up the rematch with Usyk, what could very well be his farewell fight, his swan song. This would push his retirement all the way out there to 2027, where I think this guy should have retired already. But that's the look of it. If Usyk's fighting Agit in the fall, and you want to do a rematch with Rico afterwards, it's got to be next year. And yes, there is a precedent for a second fight, for a rematch, and yes, I wouldn't mind seeing it. Rico did enough that he deserves another crack at the apple.